Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Homesteading with the Zimmermans. My name is Ruth Ann Zimmerman, and I am the creator behind our channel and our social media. And I am also the mother to 7 children, and I'm the grandmother to 1 grandson, and I'm the wife of Elvin, almost 25 years. And we have lived on this property for almost 25 years because we bought the property early in our marriage, within the first 6 months of our marriage. So in today's video, I am going to talk to you about how I stay productive and reach and keep my sights set on our long-term goal for the family and the homestead, and just how I keep every day productive. Winter weather has really set in. We had a little bit of snow last night, yesterday, and temperatures with the wind chills, the real feels are down in the teens. So it feels good to sit in the little bit of sunshine that we're going to get today. It's probably about all we're going to see of it is bits and pieces this morning. And to have something nice and calm to do, to create and edit, and things are frozen outside. So before we dive into the meat of this episode, I want to give you a little bit of information about the sponsor of this video. So if you've been here before, you know that Reliance Publication has sponsored one of my previous videos, and we just got our winter issue of their Self-Reliance magazine, and guys, you're gonna love this. Well, the best part is they're giving you 50% off of this magazine when you subscribe. 50% off for a year's subscription, and that link is it's the first link in my description. But the contents of this winter magazine, issue number 35, raising broiler chickens, making natural candles, build a pallet fence, homemade pasta. My favorite thing to find in a magazine of any kind is people encouraging you to make your homemade pasta. And winter canning, things to can throughout the winter when you're not preserving from the garden. And so all of the information that's in here is also on the internet. I know that you can find it for free on the internet, but there's so much value to the printed word, and I find value in sitting down and reading this and being able to lay it aside and come back to it, whereas the internet has kind of that feel of urgency, or it almost makes me anxious when I find something on the internet. And every time I find something, if there's a PDF version, I will go and print it out right away, because the printed word, it just adds so much value, and it quiets my world when I'm not cooking or reading from the internet. So don't forget to go check them out. You have a personal landing page just for my followers, and that link is at the very top in the description. Okay, thank you for listening to that word about our sponsor, and we're gonna dive into this video, and I have lots of B-roll footage to keep those of you that are watching entertained, as well as those of you that are only listening to our video. So today's topic was inspired by years and years of me trying to balance everything and prioritize what needs to be prioritized. And, how does housekeeping fit into homesteading? And how do I meet my children, my family's emotional need at the same time that I am meeting my standards of nutrition, and just the constant, like, being guilty because I, sacrificed nutrition because I had sick children, and now we're eating, Kraft mac and cheese because I, wasn't able to prepare a good nutritious meal. All of that, all tangled into one. And then, in all the speaking engagements that I've done in the past year, this was a question that was asked often. And so I put together what I feel is my blueprint for staying productive and prioritizing my days, which turns into prioritizing my weeks and my month, and ultimately has turned into prioritizing my years. So I've done this topic at multiple events, and it's well received. And when I do this topic at events, I title it Embracing Your Role as the Primary Nurturer, because as a mother, most of the management of the home and the family, and even if you don't have a homestead or you don't homeschool, the management of the family still falls mostly on your shoulders. So this is how I have learned how to prioritize my days to be the most productive and still meet our long-term goals. So ultimately, our long-term goals for the family are for every one of our children to have the opportunity to know God, to love Him, to serve Him, and ultimately to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. So that's our long-term personal, goal for the family as a unit. But then we also have, goals as far as health and nutrition and the homestead. And so all of those have to fit into, each day. I have to work at them each day. So what I've learned throughout the years, and especially those very emotionally intense years where the emotional needs of the family were really, really high, those were the years where most of you know that we have 2 adopted sons. So long story short, we added 3 little boys to our family in 2 short years. And we had 2 adoptions, and then we had a surprise miracle baby. And that surprise miracle baby was conceived against all odds. I almost died giving birth to him, and he almost died. So as you can imagine, that recovery was long and intense. And at the same time, we had just adopted, 2 other little boys. And those of you that are adopted parents know that that comes with a lot of, or I should say, high emotional needs. Like you're bonding and building relationship with toddlers that, come with trauma and triggers. And anyway, so those years, and also the other thing within those years, was I was a brand new mom to teenage daughters. Like that was brand new to me. So we were learning to navigate that as parents. At the same time, I was healing from childbirth, and Elvin, was healing from the trauma of almost losing me. And we had children in between the teenagers and the babies, and we had a milk cow. And so those were probably the most intense parenting years in the history of my parenting so far. So those are the years that really refined me and helped me put this blueprint in place so that I feel at peace every day with the amount of things I got done, or with the productivity of that day. So my blueprint for a productive day on the homestead as a mother and as the primary nurturer of the family, simply meaning I am the one that deposits more emotionally into the family than I deposit into the bank account. So the primary earner deposits into the bank account. I, as the primary nurturer, am the one that's making the most deposits into the emotional health of our children. So the blueprint for a productive day is, number one is the emotional needs of the family. That's priority. Number two is nutritional needs. And number three is housekeeping. Now, if my mom and grandma were listening to this, they would be scolding me. I can just hear them scolding me for putting housekeeping so low on my list of priorities. But those of you that are, like my mom and grandma and have very tidy homes, and that's a priority to you, hear me out. I promise I'm not being a neglectful housekeeper. So let's start with priority number one is the emotional needs of the family. And that doesn't look like me meeting the emotional needs of the family, checking it off the list, and then moving on to the nutritional needs of the family, and then checking that off the list, and then moving on to housekeeping. It's not at all how I don't keep a checklist. It's just like these three priorities are in my head mentally. And what it means is if an emotional need comes up, that takes priority. You lay things aside and you deal with and you nurture that child that needs nurturing. And if your family's anything like mine, it's going to be multiple children, and the emotional needs are priority, because that is what creates emotionally healthy adults, is when there's emotionally available parents. So emotional needs are a priority. When your children are little, when you have a house full of infants and toddlers and preschool age children, in addition to, elementary, middle school, teenagers, you're going to spend most of your day meeting emotional needs, and that is okay. Everything else gets whittled down to the bare minimum when you're in a stage of meeting emotional needs, because your long-term goal is emotionally healthy adults. And that means for a season, we have to be emotionally available 24/7. And I've been in that season. And guess what? It doesn't last forever. During those seasons of intense emotional needs, nutritional needs, although they were on my mind a lot, because they're very important to me, I didn't allow myself to feel guilt about not meeting the nutritional needs of my family the way I wanted to, because the nutritional needs of the family have no eternal value. The souls of my children do. So therefore, meeting their emotional needs took priority over, meeting the nutritional needs. And during that intense season that I was talking about, we whittled our homestead down to the bare minimum. That was the family milk cow. I hung on to her. Now, we didn't have two milk cows like we have now, and I'll visit that in a little bit, but we had one little Dexter milk cow, and she gave us about a gallon a day. I was not making cheese. I was not, doing all these, nutritious things with the milk. We simply were drinking the milk, using it to cook, and maybe making some yogurt, every once in a while when we had time. That we whittled the nutritional needs down to, or our standards. I lowered my nutritional standards because emotional needs came first. I wasn't making my own pasta. I was barely making our own bread, Maybe I made granola every once in a while when I had time, but we were probably consuming much more cereal than you see us eat now. And it's simply, I adjusted the nutritional needs to fit the amount of time I had. But the most important thing was I did not allow myself to beat myself up or be guilty when I couldn't meet the standards of nutritional needs that I had in my head. So that brought peace, and it gave me so much joy and freedom to meet the emotional needs of my family. I'm not saying that there wasn't still frustrating days when I'm like, oh my goodness, this child is not napping. Those of you that know the family know which child I'm talking about, because we had one child that was just not a sleeper. So there was still those moments of frustration, right? But it wasn't like I felt like I needed to allow him to just scream it out in his crib because I needed to make pasta. No, the baby's emotional health was more important than if my family ate store-bought pasta or homemade pasta. So that's how I learned how to stack my days, how to prioritize my days, simply because God brought me so many emotional needs at one time that I had to lower my standards of nutritional needs. And then housekeeping fell way down to the bottom. So when we're learning to prioritize the emotional needs of our children and our husband, our family, it's important to remember that this is a long-term goal. It's not just for today, but meeting the emotional needs of our family helps them trust us, and then they are connected to us. And children will cooperate with and listen to the person that they are most connected to. And if you're connected to your children, you're also the main influence in their life, and you are the primary person who shapes their identity. So it's very, very important to understand that emotional needs of the family are a priority, and it's not always going to be as intense as when you have infants and toddlers and preschool age, and even multiple children in each of those ages, because our baby is now 8 years old, and it looks a whole lot different when your baby is 8 years old than when your baby is 8 months old and you have multiple children in multiple stages, ranging all the way up to age 16. Because now I have to be much more intentional about noticing the emotional needs of our family. But most of this can be done while we work on meeting the nutritional needs of the family. So, we can chat while we're milking the cow, or I can meet the emotional needs while we're cooking dinner, because we can have a conversation. And rarely anymore are the emotional needs of the 5 children that are still in our home the kind that makes me drop everything and spend an hour on the rocking chair like when they were 8 months old. Most of the emotional needs of the family in the stage that we're in can now be met while we're working on the homestead. And almost 100% of our homestead chores fall under the category of nutritional needs. Whether we're milking the cows or taking care of the cows, or, taking care of the pasture so that our cows give good milk, or even, if we're taking care of the chickens, all of those chores that we do fall under the category of the nutritional needs of the family. But we can meet the emotional needs of the family fairly well while we are working on the nutritional needs. So it looks different. I wish I could go back and tell myself, when I had 3 babies in 2 elementary age and 2 teenagers, I wish I could go back and tell myself that it's not always going to be this way. It's going to be short, and then you'll be moving on to a stage that the emotional needs aren't as demanding. The emotional needs are still there, they're just not quite as demanding. So and what you see is us putting all this time and energy into the nutritional needs of the family. But just know this: there was a time where the nutritional needs, the nutritional standards that I had, weren't getting met because I was busy meeting the emotional needs. But meeting the emotional needs of young children creates young adults and teenagers that are emotionally stable and healthy. And like I said before, if your children are connected to you, you get to be the main influence in their life. And they cooperate with you, they listen to you, and you get to influence them and help shape their identity. And that is the ultimate goal, because if we can influence our children to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, then we have given them the greatest gift of all. Because just like we see modern day celebrities chase after one happiness after the next, and win Super Bowl after Super Bowl, and they're still not satisfied. And even in the Bible, King Solomon and Job, Solomon, went on a wild pursuit of happiness, and Job loses everything. And at the very end, they come back to this: the only thing that satisfies the human heart is the creator of the human heart. So to be able to influence our children to love God and serve Him and have their identity in Him is the greatest gift we could ever give them. It's not about what kind of food they eat or even how tidy their house was. Your relationship with them is going to be more of a gift to them than anything else. So that is why meeting the emotional needs of your family is such a priority. And meeting the nutritional needs of your family should be second. And last but not least, let's talk about housekeeping. Where does that fit in after, you've spent majority of your day meeting emotional needs? You spend a little bit of time cooking and gardening or whatever you're doing to meet the nutritional needs of your family. And all of that creates a mess and, dirt, and, the family's in and out. So when is the right time for housekeeping? So like I said earlier, my mom and grandma would probably tell me that you were raised to keep a house cleaner than what you are. And it took me years to stop feeling guilty because my standards of housekeeping were not the same as my mom's, right? But I have come to the realization that the state of my house is nobody's business except my own, and that as long as I am able to meet the emotional and nutritional needs of my family, then housekeeping as long as my housekeeping does not, okay, let me start over. As long as the messy state of my house is not interfering with the way that I can meet the emotional needs and the nutritional needs of my family, then it's nobody else's business, or then it doesn't matter. So for example, I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, here are some guidelines to be able to keep a tidy house. I'm not going to say you must make your bed every day, you must sweep your floor every day, and you must absolutely wash all your dishes before you go to bed. No, I'm here to give you a whole lot more peace and freedom and joy than having to follow certain rules to keep house. What I'm going to tell you is this. I don't care if you wash your dishes before you go to bed or not, but here's what you need to think about. If you wake up and all of yesterday's dirty dishes in the sink discourage you from meeting the nutritional needs of your family, let's say all those dirty dishes in the sink from yesterday discourage you to the point where you're going to give your children Pop-Tarts for breakfast instead of cooking them a nice nutritious breakfast, then yes, you need to make washing those dishes a priority. But if those dishes, yesterday's dishes in the sink, if they don't affect your ability to meet the nutritional needs of your family, then it doesn't matter if you leave them. If you're able to look past those dirty dishes and still meet the nutritional needs of your family, then just leave the dishes. If you're comfortable with that. So basically, whatever level of tidy you have to be able to first meet the emotional needs of the family and second meet the nutritional needs of the family, that is the level of tidy you need to keep. Because for myself, I have learned to keep the level of tidy just with a little bit of daily tidying, but sometimes we get busy with emotional and nutritional needs of the family, right? And the housework falls by the wayside, and it starts affecting how pleasant of a mother I am. Like I start feeling short and discouraged, and I snap at the children. Then I know that it's time to move housekeeping up to a priority because I'm no longer able to be the kind of mother that I want to be. I'm no longer able to meet my standards for meeting their emotional needs because my house is so messy. So, wherever that level of tidy is for you, that is where you need to keep your housekeeping. There are no hard and fast rules. There's no like, you're a good housekeeper if you make your bed every day or wash your dishes after every meal. That's not the truth. The truth is, if you don't do any of those things but you can meet the emotional needs of your family, then you have succeeded. And I'm going to tell you that my level of tidy is kind of, in a nutshell, is if it's behind closed doors, it doesn't bother me. But if I have to look at it, it bothers me. And there were many, many years where my bed didn't get made every day and my floors certainly didn't get swept every day, because I was busy meeting the emotional needs and the nutritional needs of the family. So don't let anybody make you feel guilty. If you're sitting and rocking your baby, it doesn't matter what state your house is in, unless it's so cluttered it's making you cranky. And here again, only you know where your level of tidy is. It's not your mother, it's not your grandmother, it's not the internet influencers that are making you feel guilty because your house isn't as tidy as theirs are. The goal is not a tidy, perfect house. The goal is emotionally stable children that are connected to their parents. That is the ultimate goal of your family and your homestead. So, in conclusion, about housekeeping and why it is third on my list is because I firmly believe that although I want my children to live in a tidy and clean space, I'm not going to be legalistic about how clean our home is or how perfect our furniture is kept or any of those things, because they have no eternal value. There's no eternal value in keeping a clean and tidy home. So, keeping it to my level of comfort and the rest of it being nobody else's business is the only tidier I'm going to keep my home, because I really don't enjoy housekeeping that much. And then let's go back and wrap everything up. Thank you everybody for getting all the way to the end of this video. And I know it's not as long as some of my videos, but still thank you for being here. Now, to summarize everything and wrap this up, emotional needs are number one priority, because when you meet the emotional needs of your children, they bond with you, they trust you, you're connected to them, and in that way, you get to influence them, you get to help shape their identity, they listen to what you have to say, and that is how you're going to give them the greatest gift of their life, by influencing them to love God, to serve Him, and to accept God's Son as their Savior. So that is why emotional needs are number one. And then nutritional needs are number two, because when we feel well, we act well. So let me rephrase that. When we eat well, we feel well. And when we feel good, then we can be the best version of ourselves. We can then be the best humans when we feel well. So I often struggle at this stage that we're in, because we're putting so much effort into our nutritional needs now. I often struggle not to make that my number one priority, because the emotional needs of my household are less out there, right? They're less in my face. Like an 8-month-old is going to fuss and cry until you pick them up, and you're going to be forced to leave the kitchen and leave whatever you were cooking, or the garden when you're growing things. You're going to be forced to leave that to tend to his needs. But with an 8-year-old, it's much easier to just push them off and ignore their needs. So it takes a lot of mental energy to catch the emotional needs of the stage we're in, and not just plow straight ahead and make the nutritional needs such a priority. And that's the stage that most of you see us in. And you see us, eating all this wonderful food. And I'm, make entire videos with us using everything that we've raised. And our jars, our shelves are full of jars of homegrown food. And our freezers are jam-packed full of homegrown meat. And that's what you see. But I want you to know that our heart is not about the nutrition. The very heart of this channel is about the heart of the family. It's just really hard to convey that in all the videos. And also, I understand that not everybody wants to hear that. But this is just me saying our priority is the hearts of our family and not nutrition, even though it looks like we're obsessed with nutrition. Nutrition has no eternal value, and when there is emotional needs, nutritional needs should fall to the bottom, or not the bottom, but should go down. But as I said, it's really hard for me not to focus primarily on nutrition right now because the emotional needs of the family aren't as intensely demanding as when they're infants and toddlers. But here again, when we eat well, we feel well, and when we feel well, we act well. And or sometimes I say to the kids, just basically, when you eat junk, you act like junk. And so for that reason, nutrition is second. Emotional needs, then nutritional needs, and then very last is housekeeping, because I know, I can feel it coming, I can see it coming. There's going to be a time where I can keep my house, I can raise my standards of housekeeping, because there's going to be less traffic and less people in my house, and things will stay, right? My floors will stay cleaner. My dishes will get put in the proper place every time. Right now, they don't, because I have little boys doing the dishes, and that's okay. The standards of the way you keep your kitchen are much higher at my mom's house or my grandma's house. But you know what? My standards for my kitchen is not that high right now because I need the little boys to develop the skill of helping in the kitchen. So they're helping and the dishes don't get put away properly. I have a couple cabinet doors on my kitchen sink that the hinges are broke because little boys don't gently put away dishes. There's always some acrobatics going on in the kitchen when they're putting away dishes. So I've had to really, really lower my standards of where things go. And yeah, we can fix the kitchen sink again. It's not a big deal. I've had to lower my kitchen, not cleanliness, but tidiness. Lower my kitchen tidiness standard. But that time is going to end. I know that it's going to. They're going to grow up. They're going to get jobs. They're not going to be here when it's time to do dishes. And then I can keep it exactly the way I want. And there's going to be a time for that. Now is not the time. Now's the time where we're working together in the kitchen, building relationship, meeting emotional needs, and working on nutrition. And, housekeeping is not at the top of our list. So there's coming a time where I will be able to keep my house the way I want. For now, as long as I'm able to be a pleasant mother and meet emotional needs and work on relationships first, and then meet nutritional needs, then I'm keeping a house good enough. So I think that brings us to the end of this video, and I'm very grateful for all of you to be here. Please give me your feedback. I would love to know what you think of, of this type of blueprint for being productive. And don't forget to visit the link in the description. All of the links are there. I've started creating a little bit of an Amazon storefront with some of our favorites that might be Christmas gift ideas. And so all of those links are in the description, but the very first link is the link to the Reliance publication, where you're going to come to a landing page that gives you 50% off of your 1-year subscription. So thank you everybody for being here, and we will see you next week with my favorite video of the year, which is our Thanksgiving video, where I just make a video of all the different seasons, and it just making the video feels almost like a form of worship to me, because it helps me be so grateful for everything that God has done for us in the past year. So we'll see you next week.